I think it's so beautiful that INFJs have the ability to be conscious and messy. Like being able to be hyper aware and also really empathetic, but then also like open to the possibility of what could happen, even though it feels uncomfortable.
Hi there, this is Sarah Kuhn. If you are an INFJ or in a relationship with an INFJ or related to an INFJ in any way, and you want to figure out how they operate, what makes them tick, and how to communicate with them better, this is the show for you. It's called The Quiet Ones. This is a show that deconstructs INFJs, what they are, how they think, how they feel, how they operate, and how they relate to people with other personality types. Whether you have just found out that you're an INFJ or have known for a number of years, there is something for everyone. You will learn more about your personality type so that you understand who you are and understand how you operate in the workplace, in relationships, in your family, and with friends. I want you to walk away from every episode feeling like you have a place of belonging, feeling like you are no longer alone, feeling like you have a place to be heard and seen and understood as you really are. This is a place to connect with other INFJs, to learn and grow and really thrive. I want to give you inspiration and real life strategies that are going to help you figure out how to live your best life every single day. Though INFJs are very rare, you are not alone in this world. You are not the only one who thinks the way that you do and feels the way that you do. Hear from real INFJs just like you. Hi there, Sarah Kuhn here. Welcome to another episode of The Quiet Ones. I hope that you are having a good week this week. I know that it's early, and there's a lot going on in the world right now. And I know that a lot of it is difficult to deal with, honestly. It's been really difficult for me to deal with too. And I just kind of wanted to take a minute and to check in, to see how things are going. For me as an introvert, it doesn't seem like there's that much difference in my life, honestly. I'm really enjoying the fact that I get to work from home and that it's not only okay, but people are telling me to stay home now. I'm totally fine with that. But it feels really eerie when you go to the grocery store and there's nothing there and there really aren't a lot of people there. And again, while that's nice, it's difficult to deal with, honestly. And for me, I'm not really that concerned about the virus. I don't know why that is. Maybe because one of my friends actually sent me something this week that said that people with anxiety disorders are able to deal with these kinds of situations a little bit better because we're used to talking ourselves down from this because we do it every single day. We deal with situations in our head every single day that feel like the end of the world. So when we come up on big situations, we know how to talk ourselves down. We know how to deal with it because we do it every single day. At the same time, it's definitely different, right? It's not just in your head. It's not just something that you can talk yourself out of and say, okay, this is not what it seems to be. It's difficult to get information from the right sources and to get accurate information that's not sensationalized. And I think for me, that's been the most difficult part because you just don't know when it's going to end. And you really want life to go back to normal, but it's hard to know when that's going to be. So I think the best thing that we can do is understand that right now this is our reality, and we just have to make it through each and every day. And I try really hard. This is one of my tips for dealing with anxiety because I've dealt with it for so long. A lot of times when you're looking at something that's a really big project or a really big thing in your life, kind of like, like this is, it's really hard to think about how big it is all at once, right? But it's a little bit easier to say, okay, I can just make it through this month. And if that feels too hard, then you can say, okay, I can just make it through this week. And if that feels too hard, I can just make it through today. And if that feels too hard, then you can say, okay, I can just make it until lunchtime, or I can just make it through this hour. I can do this. We can do this. We're all in this together. This is affecting every single one of us. Every single person in this world has to deal with it. And right now, there's a lot of resources out there. So many people who are normally going 1,000 different directions are all coming together and saying, hey, what can we do for each other? There's a lot of extra podcasts. I've noticed a ton of videos on Facebook, live videos. People like Mel Robbins and Kathy Heller and Gabby Bernstein are all coming together. Emily McDowell is another one. They're wonderful, amazing people who've all written these amazing books, and you should definitely check them out if you haven't. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on, honestly. There's a lot of stuff that I'm doing as well, and I think it's because, because we're staying home more, that we have more time, and then there's also this big thing going on, and it's kind of, we're taking it as a chance to reevaluate what we're doing with our lives and what's important as well, which is always a good thing. I did a podcast episode this past Thursday. If you didn't check it out, make sure that you do. It's all about, I talked a little bit about the situation in the world, but most of it was about perfectionism and being messy and doing what you really want to do rather than doing what you think that you have to do. And there's such a big difference there. And sometimes we don't even think about it. We just do what we think that we have to do because we've just always been told that that's what we have to do, and we never knew that there was another option. So definitely go check that out. I also talked a little bit on that episode about how I started a new blog. I'm not taking away from anything that I'm doing. I'm just adding more and more to it. A lot of people ask me about marketing nowadays. I have 49,000 followers on Instagram, and it's just been a little bit over a year that I've had that account. And so I've been asked to be a guest on different podcasts, and most of them want to talk about marketing, which is fine. I love talking about marketing. I have worked in digital marketing for about 10 years, and I think that kind of gives me an advantage in this space, which I'm grateful for. But I'm more than willing to talk about those kinds of things and to share everything that I know and have learned, because it's been a huge learning curve for me, trying to run a business. And now I have 4 different websites, and there's a lot that goes into it. It's not simple and it's not easy, but it is fun. It's a lot of fun, and it's very challenging, and I'm learning something new all the time, which is part of why it's fun. So if you're interested in learning about marketing, about blogging, email marketing, Pinterest, Instagram, any of those types of things, please come and check it out. The website is sarahkuhn.co. So it's sarahkuhn.co. I'm also doing a little bit of one-on-one coaching for anybody who's interested in starting a blog or already has a blog or a podcast and wants some advice on how to grow it, especially with Instagram and Pinterest and email marketing as well. So if you're interested, make sure that you go check out my website, and you can find all the information there. You can also reach out to me through email, and I'll put my email in the show notes. And you can also find me on Instagram, which is @INFJwoman. Okay, so just a couple of other things. If you haven't checked out INFJ Community, make sure that you go over and check it out. You can find it at infjcommunity.com. It's an exclusive community just for INFJs. I am doing a new live podcast that is exclusive to the community every single week on Sunday evenings. And because it's live, you can join and be a part of the chat. And you can ask questions and interact, and it's a great way for us to connect. There's going to be a whole bunch of guests, a lot of people that you've seen on my podcast, relationship coaches, life coaches, self-love coaches, business coaches. And the great part about it, because it's live, you can interact with them and you can ask the questions that you're interested in. You don't just have to rely on me to ask the right questions. So make sure that you check it out. The community is a membership site. However, if you pre-order my book, which is called the INFJ User Guide, one of the bonuses is that you get 3 months free membership into the INFJ community. So if you're interested in the community, make sure that you go pre-order my book, and you can get 3 months for free to check it out. Also, when you pre-order my book, there are a couple of other bonuses. This past weekend, we just did the How to Find Your Purpose Masterclass. It was a live masterclass. It's recorded, so you can still see it. But there are 2 other live masterclasses that are coming up. One of them is about how to start a podcast, and the other one is about how to turn your blog into a profitable business. You also get a free ebook called What to Do When You're INFJ that has a lot of information about different situations that come up and how to handle them, especially as an INFJ. So yes, make sure that you go and check out my book. It's coming out in just a couple of weeks, and I'm so excited for you guys to read it. It's an amazing book. I have really put my heart and soul into that, and I really know that you're going to love it. And if you're an INFJ, you definitely need this in your life. Definitely. I'm putting the link for it in the show notes, so you can also find it on my website at infjwoman.com. All right, today we are talking to Gabby Valdes. Gabby is an amazing relationship coach. I absolutely adore her. She is not an INFJ, she's an ENFP actually, but she is a wonderful person. And I completely understand why so many INFJs are attracted to ENFPs. She is so bubbly and happy and so sweet. Honestly, I've talked to her a couple of times now, not just for the podcast, but we've had a few conversations, and she has like this magnetic appeal, honestly. And one of the best things that I absolutely love about her, she has changed my perspective on being an INFJ. When I found out I was INFJ, I was kind of like, oh, I don't really know about this. And in my head, I seem to look at all the negative things. It's just kind of one of those things that I do. If you notice my blog, there's a lot of things about misconceptions or myths or the dark side of our personality or the problems that we go through. That's because that's usually where my head is at. If you see something positive, it's probably because I've taken a look at what I've been writing recently and kind of gotten a little bit scared. Like, oh, hey, people are probably thinking that, you know, I'm like this super dark person. Maybe I need to write something happy every once in a while. But Gabby has completely changed that, honestly. She has such an amazing view of INFJs, and she's absolutely in love with our personality. And it completely shows in the way that she writes and in the way that she talks about us. She's written a couple of blog posts for my blog at INFJ Woman, so make sure that you go and check those out. I'll put the link for them in the show notes so that you have them right there. I hope that you enjoy the interview as much as I did. She's completely awesome. I absolutely adore her. Okay, so I'll give her a proper introduction too. Gabrielle Valdes is a love and dating coach, helping the disappointed dater recommit themselves to find true love. She focuses on emotional intimacy, molding romantic attractions, and being your own best partner first. And just a reminder, you can watch the video on YouTube at youtube.com/thequietonspodcast, and you can watch several additional videos at youtube.com/INFJwoman. Remember, you can find all the links for the show notes on my website, which is thequietonspodcast.com. So tell me about your personality type.
So I am an ENFP, so extroverted, intuitive, feeling type, and perceiving, which is really interesting because back in college, I took it and I was an ENFJ. And for the longest time, I was like, okay, like I'm an ENFJ. I know that one of the characters that identifies as that personality type is Khaleesi, and I was like, okay, I could channel my inner Khaleesi. And for the longest time, I thought I was an INFJ until I started like growing in my professional career. And one of my mentors she is an ENFP, and she was like, I don't think you're an ENFJ. You're definitely more an ENFP just based on like your enthusiasm and energy around creative projects and rallying around people and ideas, and like you really just want to like serve the people. And I was like, okay, this sounds like me. So then I started looking at the description and I was like, okay, this is me. So then I started taking the test. And then I retested as an ENFP and have just completely like delved into Myers-Briggs as a result. I feel like this has nailed it on the head. I feel so heard and seen and understood. Like I've never felt so validated. Yeah.
Yes, that's the best thing about Myers-Briggs for me, honestly. I honestly don't trust people who don't believe in it and who don't get it, because it's like, hey, you haven't read it. You don't. That's the only thing that I can come up with, because honestly, it did the same thing for me. It made me feel seen and heard and understood. And it's like, oh, somebody finally gets me, right?
I love this because I tend to date either INFJs or ENTJs, and the TJs are just like, I don't believe this. Like, at least the ones that I've interacted with, like the T types are just like, I'm skeptical, and all the feeling types are like, yay, I feel so understood.
That's funny. Wow. My niece is actually an INTP, and she's obsessed with it.
Okay.
But she could also be feeding off of me too, because I'm completely obsessed with it as well.
Yeah, I feel like it's a great introspective tool. You actually get the language to understand what's going on internally. And if we don't have that language, then we're just kind of left to our own devices. And we're, at least for me, I was not able to articulate how I felt. So I would just like clumsily have relationships and not understand who I was. And then once I started diving into Myers-Briggs, I started to really accept myself, love myself, and then realize, okay, these are my strengths. These are the things that I can also work on. Like for ENFPs, we're known to like have poor practical skills, or we have that stereotype of being flighty and flaky. And for the longest time, I had shame around that. And then I realized, okay, this is just something that I can be aware of, accept, and then also figure out how to develop that skill. So like 5 years into like knowing that, I'm like, oh, okay, like I actually have some pretty decent like practical skills now, and I like you can get things done as a result of having that awareness and acceptance. So it's been such a transformative tool, and a tool that I use to build empathy with other people too. So if someone's an INFJ and I'm dating them, I will research them, which I've done so many times.
I love that you use it as a tool to get rid of the shame that you have for certain things. I have done the same thing. There have been so many times where when I was growing up, people would tell me, you shouldn't be so quiet. You need to talk more. There's a problem that you're so quiet. And then some other things too, like being judgmental or needing to have plans or having high expectations, all of these things. And it's like, I thought I was broken, seriously, until I found this description of who I am. And I'm like, oh, I'm not broken. I'm just different than what they are. And that's totally fine. We can be different, but it's still okay for me to be who I am, which makes such a huge difference.
Yeah, I even took like a deep breath hearing you talk, because I'm like, yeah, you can just like be okay being different. It's just, it's nice. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So you are a relationship coach. Tell me your story. How did you get to be a relationship coach?
Yeah. So love and dating is always something that I've been obsessed with. So it's a lot of just experiences. I've been in different types of relationships. I've also spent, time dating. And then more on, I guess, like the career side, I have a background in communications and then a master's in behavioral psychology and analysis. So I've always loved figuring out how people work and what makes them tick. And I just feel so lucky that I'm able to do that within the context of love and dating, because it's just such a juicy topic. I feel like relationships are the stuff of life. And that's the whole reason why we're here, is to connect and to find belonging. So yeah, my journey has been very interesting. It's definitely a quintessential ENFP. I did not uh, graduate college and was like, I want to be a love and dating coach. I tried my hand in many things, and it makes a lot of sense in retrospect. But during the time, I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm so confused. This is just me going towards like the impulse, like, okay, this thing excites me, I'm gonna do that, I'm gonna try my hand at that. So was a preschool teacher and educator for a couple of years, then felt really called to creating more inclusive classroom environments. So then I transitioned to behavioral therapy. And then at that point, I was like, I love what I do on the day to day, but there has to be something more. So again, kind of like the grass is greener. I'm going to take a year off and kind of design my own apprenticeships. So I spent the year like trying photography and social media strategy and design and cooking and all these different things to just really figure out who I was. And at that point, I landed a pretty sweet gig at this design firm that was really just human centered. So I learned so many things just about like the design process, and that applies to life. So just like life is all an experiment. It's an iterative process. We're never going to get it right the first time. So let's like go back to the drawing board and figure things out. And I had such a supportive and like vulnerable community and team. So that really inspired me to then become a life coach. I really loved working with people as a producer at that design company, and really just like, okay, you have an idea, let's see it through. And just like going from idea to execution just like made me so happy. It brought me so much joy. And at that point, I was like, I love all this because it was impact driven companies. At the same time, I was like, I really want to get introspective here. Like, I want to know like who you are as a person. Like, I love the work that you're doing. You're making a huge impact in the world, but I also want to know who you are. So at that point, I was like, okay, it's either becoming a therapist or a coach. And I really love the idea of, seeing an idea through and then just taking action and making it happen through experiences. So I ended up going the life coach route, and I'm so glad that I did. I love being an entrepreneur. I'm glad that I get to craft days the way that I want to, and then I get to serve people the way that I believe that they deserve to be served, as opposed to going all through these like different like regulations. Mind you, I'm so for therapy. I go to therapy too, but I think for my personal path, I was like, I really just want to be somebody who's going to be like on that journey with them, be on the day to day, and help them move forward, as opposed to be super introspective in the past. So yeah, that's kind of what landed me here. And for the longest time, I was really obsessed with relationships. So meanwhile, while all of this was going on in my like professional career, my hobby was just like diving into relationships, doing my own independent research. So I'm a huge fan of Esther Perel, who is a psychotherapist, marriage and family therapist, focuses on love and relationships, and like especially around like long-term relationships and how to shift the perception around how like longevity for the longest time was like the success indicator of a relationship, and now we're kind of like questioning like, is this really for everybody? And then I'm a huge fan of Alain de Botton, who's a philosopher and talks a lot about the things that we didn't learn in school. So he's the founder of the School of Life and talks a lot about relationships, breakups, heartbreak, and the philosophy and the school of thought around that. And if you look at my library, it's really interesting. Like I'll have like nonviolent communication and like how to have like a conscious relationship, how to do conscious uncoupling, like all these things. I've just been so fascinated by love and relationships. So I've been so lucky to merge the career trajectory and the path that I chose with like the passion that I have for love and relationships. And that's how I found myself as a love and dating coach. It all makes sense now.
It does. My life is kind of the same way. Like I felt like I was lost for the first 30 years really, and I just kind of tried a bunch of different things, and then all of a sudden it made sense. And it's like people tell you that's how it is, and you're like, no, that's it doesn't happen that way for me. It's not going to be that way. And then one day it just kind of clicks and you're like, oh wow, they were right. Wow. I have to backtrack some of those things I said before.
Well, I love this insight because as I'm reflecting, I look back at my jobs and I'm like, oh, this was great. There were so many things that I learned about myself. There's so many things that I took away from it. But at the same time, I didn't feel like 100% right. It didn't make it wrong, but it didn't feel 100% right. And if I reflect on my past romantic relationships and dating experiences, I've had a lot of different examples that have a similar parallel to my career path of like, this is a nice relationship, but it still doesn't feel 100% right.
Right.
And so it's like, there's evidence in my career path of like, okay, like things just have not been a good fit. They weren't wrong, they weren't right, but it just wasn't for me long term. And now I'm in something that's like 100% full body yes. And I'm like, okay, there is evidence that this is also possible in terms of like romantic relationships. And so that's just like a really like comforting thought to know that like, okay, like it's a journey. We're going to try things out. We're going to, figure things out along the way. We don't have to get it right the first time. And it's just all a journey.
Yes. I love that too, that you said that it just doesn't feel right, because I moved 1,000 miles away from where I was for 6 years because it didn't feel like I was supposed to be there anymore. And when I tell people that, they give me this look like, really? You did that? I'm like, well, I felt like my time there was up. And they're like, what does that mean? It's nice to be able to connect with people who have that intuitive part of their personality and they just get it. I loved one of the things that you said too, that we're not going to get it right the first time. And I think especially for us as INFJs, we have this massive perfectionism thing going. We have really high expectations and we want to get things right the first time. And I know myself, I feel like if I can think it through enough, if I can plan enough, if I can look at all the different angles, then I can get it right the first time and I only have to do it once. Because if I have to do it, then it's like a disappointment. And you wrote something just this, well, it'll be 2 weeks ago when this airs, for my blog, which is INFJ Woman, that is about dealing with disappointments in dating. And I know that's one of the biggest things for me, because like I said, I want things to be right the first time. And I feel like if I could plan it well enough that I could only have to date one person and get it right the first time, and I wouldn't have to deal with all of the dating mess. That's the way I see it. It's not a fun experiment for me. It's like a mess. Every time there's a disappointment, it's like, all right, this is the end of the world. I'm not doing this. This is too much. I'm not going there anymore. It's not for me.
I totally resonate with this. And it's just so human to be able to like not want to be in the mess, because the mess leaves us vulnerable, right? We have to figure out how the other person is going to respond. Well, actually, that's like an INFJ thing, right? Of like, okay, I'm going to like figure out, or I'm also going to figure out, but then intuit what other people are like thinking and feeling. So I feel, and I'm going to be prepared. And that's a huge gift. At the same time, when we're in relationship or we're dating, it's like, we don't know what the other person is like going to throw at us, or like that, like humans are wild cards. So it's kind of just like, it's so vulnerable to be in the mess with other people. I think it's so beautiful that INFJs have the ability to be conscious and messy. Like being able to be hyper aware and also really empathetic, but then also like open to the possibility of what could happen, even though it feels uncomfortable. So a couple of things about this topic. When I think about our dating culture, like it is a little bit more on the perfectionistic side. So like you as INFJs, if you identify as a perfectionist, like you are in a supportive environment that allows you to really own your perfectionism qualities. And thinking about that is like, let's like build into that. So that's already like a solid framework of like, okay, there's a desire to change. There is a challenge or a problem. Here's how I want to fix it. And then the second part is that, okay, nailed it, done. I'm taking action. That's it. And so that's kind of just like the starting point. But when we start to add a little bit more steps to that cycle, we can really just allow ourselves to be ourselves and then like breathe. So I'm a fan of the behavior change cycle, because it allows us to all be human, but still work with like the strengths that we have around that passion and that drive to get it right the first time. So when we think about like what it means to be human, there's so many steps that are involved. So like, I won't go into like the nitty gritty details, but just to kind of give you an idea, like there are different phases. So there's like pre-contemplation, where you don't even know that you have blind spots. Like that's so human. Like the thing in your subconscious hasn't come into your consciousness yet. And then there's that phase of contemplation where you're like, okay, this is the challenge at hand. And then there's the third phase, which is preparation. So like, okay, I'm aware of the thing that I want to change. Here's how I think I can do it. And then we take action. So that's the fourth step. And then maintenance. So like continuing trying the skill, building the skill out. And then the last part of that is actually relapse. So like mistakes are 100% a part of the process. That's actually how we take the gifts and the lessons and then integrate them back in when we go back through the cycle again. So it's like a spiral upward. And I love sharing that with my community and my clients, is because it allows more compassion and empathy when we do relapse. Because in perfectionistic culture, it's like, take action, I'm done, which doesn't leave a lot of space to be human, because being messy, being able to make mistakes and accepting that is actually what's going to propel us forward. So that's how we sustain change over time, as opposed to like berating ourselves, which I personally have had that experience of like making mistakes. My internal dialogue is just like, you suck, you're a failure. So like that internal chaos ensues, and then that doesn't lead to change because we don't feel good about ourselves. And that makes a lot of sense.
Right.
So it's so complex, because that perfectionism in us is like, I see something better for me and I want something better for me, and I'm going to take action to get that done. That is beautiful. At the same time, it's like creating an environment that is going to allow you to do that in the most successful and more human way possible.
Right. We live in such a culture now as well, where you don't see the mistakes, you don't see the failures, you don't see that part. You see this perfect Instagram life of your friends, and they cut out all of the bad parts. They don't tell you about all the fights they have with their husband, or all of the times their kids are screaming laying on the floor in the grocery store. I mean, you only see these sweet pictures and you think, oh, it must be so much easier for them. I really feel like a lot of us have been poisoned by Hallmark and Disney, because they have these great experiences, and then when it comes to real life, it's like, oh, that's not how it is. So trying to match up that perfectionism with those extremely high expectations and say, okay, what is actually realistic? Because honestly, I'm really not even certain that I know.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up, because we don't necessarily question the water that we're swimming in, and we are all impacted by romanticism. So when you think about romanticism, it is like the fairy princess Disney storyline. And there's again two sides to that, right? So the way that I can like talk about this is a hopeless romantic versus a hopeful romantic. So when we think about being a hopeless romantic, and also I'm speaking from personal experience because I definitely spent a lot of my time being a hopeless romantic and feeling really disappointed with my long-term partners and the people that I dated. So this means not like really just not talking about anything practical, like basing love and that long-term decision on a feeling. I know that this is a little bit more complex, because I do believe in intuition and that gut feeling, right?
Right.
Like that's that inner knowing. So I want to distinguish between that versus kind of like um, maybe the honeymoon phase, where it's like those rush of feelings and that chemical cocktail. So there is a difference. There's a difference between intuitively knowing to your core versus like the rush of like drunken feelings that you get when you're starting off a relationship. So there's that.
Yes.
So hopeless romantics, it's so easy to become disillusioned while dating, because we've put that expectation that every person that we connect with is going to be the one. So then we put all of our hopes, our dreams, our expectations on this one person very quickly. And for me in the past, that looked like my partner had to be like my best friend, my spiritual partner, my therapist, my accountant, my social planner, like everything. This person had to be everything for me. And then thinking also about dating, like being disillusioned, like when we think about this next date is going to be the one, then we're not prepared for rejection, and we don't receive that rejection, and we make it mean something about us, when really dating is just like any other process or journey. It's trying to see whether or not this person is a good fit. And there's actually a statistic that about like 80 to 90% of people, even if we do have attraction and chemistry with them, are not going to be a good fit for the long term, which actually puts us at ease, because then we realize like, okay, not everything's going to work out, and that's okay. We allow ourselves to heal, we feel all the feelings, and then we move on more quickly, knowing that we're not for everyone, not everyone's for us. Thinking also about romanticism, or being a hopeless romantic, drama tends to be romanticized. Like, I loved having fights with my partner. It meant that they were passionate about me, and being able to then have that conflict to then feel closer, which I will say conflict is very healthy. It allows you to get emotionally close and be emotionally intimate with somebody, because you're able to work through things. So it's kind of like rupture and repair. That's what it is. So when we have conflict, our connection, or, you know, we feel misunderstood, that gets ruptured. And then conflict, if there's trust, it's not going to be clean. It's certainly going to be messy. There's going to be some feelings hurt. But you trust each other enough, you've built a solid container in your relationship to then repair it. So you're recommitting to yourself, you're recommitting to the relationship. Versus in being a hopeless romantic, drama is like you're seeking that, like you want to prove to yourself that this person is your person, because you're like feeling the heat of the passions while you're in conflict. So there's a difference between that.
A lot of saying, I want to interrupt you for a minute.
Yeah. I'm just like going down the rabbit hole.
A lot of what you're saying reminds me of one of my guilty pleasures is a show called 90 Day Fiance. And
wait, what is this? I want to know.
oh, if you haven't seen it, you have to go watch it. It's on TLC, and it's not just one show. There's 90 Day Fiance, and then there's like 5 different spinoffs of it as well. And so basically what it is people who find somebody, people who live in the United States, who find somebody who lives in a different country, and they decide that they're going to get married. And in order for them to get a visa to be in the United States, they have to go through this long process. And once they get the visa, they have 90 days from when they enter the United States to get married, or they have to go back home, right? So it's not always that, you know, they've only known each other 90 days. Some people really have. Some people have known each other for years, but they've really only been around each other for 90 days when they're, you know, together in the United States. One of the things about the show, I'm sure that a lot of it is dramatized because, you know, obviously it's TV and they're interested in ratings, but one of the big things that I just sit there with my mouth hung open, and sometimes I'm screaming at the TV like I'm watching a football game or something, because it's like, wait a minute, you two don't even speak the same language. Like, you don't even both speak English. How do you expect to get married and for this to work? I mean, you're using a translator app on your phone. How does that work, you know? And
I'm so glad that you brought this up.
It reminds me of all of these red flags. And I think that when you're on the outside of a relationship, because I have some friends too that, you know, aren't quite at that level, but I just look at their relationship and I think, oh my God, there are like 1,200 red flags here. What are you doing with your life? And it's easy for us, especially for us as INFJs, to look at somebody else and say, oh, here's all of your problems. And it's really hard for us when we're in that place to say, here's all of my problems. So especially when you're talking about fighting and conflict and, you know, all of those red flags, it's difficult to say, okay, what's healthy and what is actually a problem.
I'm so glad that you brought this up, because thinking about romanticism, we have learned that romanticism or romance means being able to intuit our partner's needs. And as INFJs, you have that ability. But as someone who's dating an INFJ, we may not understand. Like, what do you mean you already know what I need? Like, I don't know what you need. Can you tell me?
Right? And sometimes one of the biggest traps that we fall into is, I'm going to figure out what you need and I'm going to be that person that you need. And that may not be me. And so then 6 months or a year or sometimes 5 years down the road, there's like this massive blow up and you see a whole new person. And you as the partner are like so confused, like what happened here? Because you are not the person that I know. And your INFJ is looking at you going, nope, I've been pretending for 5 years and I'm done. And this is something that I've just honestly in the last year realized about myself that I do. And it's one of those things that's like, okay, this is a big weakness and I need to work on it. And, you know, like we were talking about before, like understanding. And that's one of the things that's really difficult for us as INFJs too.
I think it's also something that is certainly a gift too, like the ability to intuit someone else's needs, being able to have a deep understanding of the other person, and then also to like give that to another person. That is huge, especially in the dating world. I feel like it's so rare to come by a person who's like so open to giving. Like, you know, in a way, like it's like, oh, you're kind, warm, and generous. Wow.
That's new.
So I think that's a rare quality, but then also just being able to balance that with taking care of yourself and your needs. So like, it's a huge, huge gift to be able to do that for others. And it's like, how do you also provide that for yourself at the same time being yourself as well? And I'm really curious about this because I've talked to a lot of INFJs as well, and they have shared the same experience around, you know, making a really good first impression and then over time not being able to keep up with that perception or that mask, or to be too calculated or polished, or however you want to phrase that. But I'm so curious, like, where does that come from? Like, is that I'm sure there's many reasons too.
For me, it definitely comes from several different places. It comes from wanting to please the person that I'm with. So even if they're just a friend, I want them to like me. If it's a romantic partner and it's somebody that I really, really like, and I know from the start that I'm really going to like them, then it's like, I want this to work out. It also comes from that perfectionism place that's like, I don't want you to see my weaknesses. I just want you to see all the places that I'm really good at. But I kind of do that to myself too, because I use the example of running. I wanted to start running several years ago, and I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to lose weight. I'm going to look great. Like, this is exactly what I'm going to do. I spent a lot of money on it. And it was really difficult. Like, nobody tells you that running is really hard. I mean, they tell you it gets easier and it'll be good. And so you just keep doing it. And you're like, I've been doing this for 6 months and it's still really hard and I'm not getting any faster. And my running coach is like looking at me and he pretty much said, duh. Like, it's hard for everybody. What are you talking about? And I'm like, well, I guess somehow I thought it was going to be easier once you learned how to do it. And he's like, no, it's hard. You just get stronger. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not that strong. Okay, if this is hard, I'm just done. I'm not going to do it anymore because I don't want to do something that makes me look bad. And I felt like I looked really bad, you know? So I think that's part of it too, is that, you know, we have this idealized version of ourselves in our head. And I feel like we spend our whole lives trying to match up our real lives to this version of ourselves in our head. And it's such an idealized version that it's extremely hard to actually match up to that. But we go to extreme lengths to match up to it as well. And I feel like that's where a lot of things almost like a lot of the disorders that we have come into place, because I know that INFJs are prone to things like eating disorders and, you know, over exercising and all of those kinds of things, especially women, because, you know, just like we talked about with Disney and Hallmark and Instagram and the way that people date now, you know, you have one picture to make a first impression, and it's like, all right, it's got to be a good one, you know. And when you find somebody, I've done this so many times with friends. I find somebody and I'm like, oh, I really like that person. I want to be their friend. And I probably could have been their friend if I would have just been myself. But instead I was like, nope, I'm going to make it better. I'm going to give them exactly what they want and be like way overzealous. And they're like, oh yeah, no, thank you. And then that goes back around to the disappointment. And you're like, wait a minute, I did all of this stuff for you and you just ran away from me. Not walked, you ran away from me. And I think that feeds into the cycle of, I'm not good enough, I need to do more, I need to be something different than what I am. I think
yes. Thank you so much for sharing that. There's so much here. There's so much here to unpack. Like thinking about that over idealized persona that you have. I like to think of this as like, you have exceptional taste. Like, you know what you're capable of, you know your potential, you know what's in store for you. And as opposed to having a series of moments to get there, it's kind of like, I have to get it right the first time. Yeah. So it's kind of like, how do I ease into this, this version, this like the best version of myself, or the potential that I want to explore? How do I get there in a more realistic time frame, right? So it's like, it's a compliment. Like, you have refined, exquisite taste, right? And it's just like being able to be human and give yourselves a series of opportunities to get there, as opposed to one and done. What else did you say? So many things.
One of the big things is chasing after people. And I know that we do this a lot in romantic relationships, because it's like, you know, we decide this is the person that we want. And for me, when it comes to romantic relationships, I know exactly what I want with my little high expectations. And I have it refined down to like, I'd really like to have an INFP. So when I meet somebody who's like gorgeous and he's the right personality type and, you know, like he just fits into exactly what I want, then it's like, oh, it's you. And then it's like, oh, they're like super scared.
I adore this, because I am seriously you, but flipped. Like, I know exactly what I want, and I know that I want to date an INFJ, and I'm like, I know, I'm going for it. But so this is perfect. This is perfect too, because I know earlier in the conversation we were talking about hopeless romantic, and I kind of want to talk a little bit about hopeful romantic. So being a good judge of character, which it sounds like, I mean, INFJs, yes. Being able to be optimistic about love. Like, you believe in it, you deserve a grand love, you know that it's possible. You're also willing to put your heart on the line and take risks to get hurt, even if it is uncomfortable, even if it is devastating. And you don't leave love up to fate. Like, you're out there dating, you're being intentional about it, whether it's offline or online, and you're putting in that conscious effort. And then also you're clear about what you want in a partner. These are huge things, like amazing. And then speaking more to the disappointment, it's just like, the right person is not going to run. The right person, so it's kind of a shift in mindset. Like, it hasn't worked yet. And it will with the right person. And so then my invitation to INFJs is to practice being yourself. Because if you feel just really enthusiastic about somebody and you show that enthusiasm, you express that, the right person isn't going to run. Like, the right person's gonna be like, I love that. Definitely INFPs will love that. So it's just like being able to, see dating as an opportunity to be more yourself. I know that that's really challenging because you're so good at picking up on what other people need, and you're so good at executing and getting that right. So it's really an invitation to kind of lean back, get introspective, which you're also really good at, figure out what you truly value, what that looks like in a partner, which will then help you figure out how you want to show up. So your values that's your Bible. Like, you're going to be able to make decisions from that. So if you really value enthusiasm, be enthusiastic. If you really value transparency, have those difficult and uncomfortable conversations, knowing that you can trust yourself, that you're capable of doing that. It's not going to feel good the first time, like just like the running, like it's going to be difficult in a way that's, just like any beginner, right? Like, it's a humbling experience to be a beginner at something, but over time, it's still going to be hard work, but it does get easier over time because you've flexed that muscle, you've built that skill, and it becomes even more rewarding because it's that long-term game. I know that's going to be challenging. Just know that it's not going to feel good. It's going to be uncomfortable, but know in the long term, that's what you want and that's what you deserve. So you deserve that grand love. You deserve someone that's going to compliment you. It is possible. And yes, I would invite you to put in that work.
I love what you said about practice being yourself. I really feel like in the last year, that's been one of the things that I've done. It's like, okay, let me figure out who I am outside of everybody else. And sometimes for INFJs, that takes us separating ourselves from everybody else, which is kind of a difficult process because a lot of times we rely on our friends to tell us how we feel about things, which sounds weird, but I've noticed this, that when there's something going on in my life, like there's this guy that I met and I was like, oh, I think he likes me, but I'm really not sure. And I don't know how to feel about this because for INFJs, it takes us a while to figure out how we feel. And when I say a while, it could be 3 to 6 months. Sometimes it's a year. So it's like, okay, I don't know how I feel. So let me go ask all of my friends what they think. And then I'll take all of their opinions and try to form my own opinion about what's going on. And so having that awareness that that's how I process things, then it's like, okay, how do I feel about this outside of everybody else's opinion? How do I feel about this by myself? And I realized that I do that not only about situations, but I do that about decisions in my life or, the way that I think about things. And so it's like really having to separate myself from that and say, okay, outside of everybody else, what do I really think?
I love this because it's kind of like a soundboard decision-making process. You're taking in other people's experiences. And as an INFJ, you're even like taking that energy, you're like embodying it. You're figuring out if that fits, if it feels good. And you're the curator of other people's experiences. And then you're able to then take what you've learned and apply it to you and see what fits, what doesn't, what sticks, what doesn't. And so it's being able to like trust yourself as you're going through that decision-making process of like, okay, I'm going to rely on trusted friends and family to get feedback. And then really carving out that time for you to then turn inward and figure out what fits for you. So that's such an important part of the process, being able to be introverted, being able to figure things out on your own. And again, the right partner is also going to see that as a huge gift, because everyone needs that time to recalibrate and decompress or to sit with things. And so another thing as a ENFP who has dated many INFJs is I would invite the INFJ to communicate that to a partner, whether that partner be an ENFP or any other type. Let them into your process. Let them know, be proactive about like what you want and need and how you make decisions. So they're on that journey with you. And I know that could look different ways because, decisions are not just kind of like one size fits all. So like trust yourself to be able to bring people into the process when you feel like, that feels good and that's right. But please communicate with us.
It's so difficult too, because honestly, I'm 34 years old and I've just realized this in the last year. So it's like, I didn't even know what I was doing. You know, you really have to have this awareness of like, okay, I can analyze everybody else's situation, but I can't look at myself and see what's going on. And it really took one of my friends kind of opening my eyes to it before I was like, oh, wow, no wonder. No wonder people get confused when, you know, I can't give them answers to something for 6 months, because they don't understand that it really does take me 6 months to figure it out. And then I have like this epiphany and it's like, oh, all the dots finally connected and I'm good. I got it now. I don't know if you ever watched the TV show Friends. You know,
I've seen a couple of episodes, yeah.
Joey was like always a few steps behind everybody else, and there would be a joke, and then he would be like confused, and a few minutes later he's like, oh, and everybody's like, yep, there it is. That's me. That's my experience.
INFJs have Joey moments. I love it.
It's not a few moments, though. It's a few months.
3 months of moments. I think that that's an opportunity then to get into the practice of sharing that you don't know the answer yet. So maybe that's where the juice is. Like,
see,
I don't know. There's something off, but I don't know. And I'm sitting with it. I just want to tell that to you. There's nothing to be alarmed about. I'm just processing.
So this is where I'm like totally convinced that I need an INFJ or an INFP, because that's what they do. They look at themselves and how they feel first, and then they look at everybody else. And as INFJs, we're opposite. We look at how everybody else feels, and then once we're done with that, then we look at ourselves and say, okay, how do we feel? And like I said, it can be a long process, but what I've heard and what I've been told from people who are actually in this relationship, that an INFP can help you sort out your problems first, or like can help you figure out how you feel too. And I'm like, oh my God, that sounds so dreamy. I need that in my life. And it kind of goes back to something else that you were talking about too, about, I wrote down some notes because you said so many killer things. We place a lot of expectations on the romantic partners that we have in our lives to be everything. And, you know, like you said, your accountant and your psychologist and everything, because as INFJs, we don't need a lot of people in our lives. In fact, I really, really feel like I could live with one other person in my life. But then at the same time, I know that that's placing too much expectations on them. And that you need to diversify a little bit, only if it's, you know, even if it's only 2 or 3 other people, that one person can't be the be all end all of everything. You can't expect them to be everything and to know everything.
We're definitely social creatures. And it's about, that community. Like, one person can't be our community. They can certainly be a huge part of our lives, but really diversifying like people that we can turn to.
Yes. So you wrote another blog piece that's called How to Find Love as an INFJ. And I want to talk about that too, because that's the most important thing, right? As introverts, we want to run home and jump into our bed and in our pajamas and stay there every single night, all weekend long. We don't want to go out. Dating apps are like torture for us because we do like people, but we don't like shallow conversations. We hate the process of getting to know somebody. We want to talk about your hopes and your dreams and what you think about the meaning of life. So how do we do that? How do we find love in those complicated circumstances?
I love this question. I just want to validate all the things that you are experiencing as well as the INFJ community, because being on the dating app, it doesn't feel good to be an option, right? Especially as like INFJs are like, okay, like I know what I want. I want that deep connection. Let's like talk about what your highlight of your year was. Like, let's go. And so it can feel really dehumanizing, disheartening when you're just like another profile or another number on someone else's app. So I just want to acknowledge that. And so just like with any tool or process, there's like always a positive and negative. So like I love the idea of being able to connect with people that we would normally not have the option to connect with as a result of like technology. And so my invitation to you is, if you are on the apps, like maybe just, respond to other people's invitations or likes. Like don't, if it feels draining to be on the app and swiping, perhaps don't spend your time and energy on that. Actually, let me also reel it back in terms of like online and offline dating. Do the thing that fuels you. So how do you, the question that I would ask is, how do you want to spend your days? How do you want to spend your energy? And if in this season of your life, you're like, okay, I'm actually like excited about being on the apps, go on the apps and then create those boundaries around what is going to be more successful for you. Whether that's only like responding to people that have already initiated with you, and then also maybe only capping it to like talking to one romantic interest at a time, so that you can really focus that energy on that person. And then like, moving it into like meeting them in person. And in terms of being an introvert in an extroverted world, I would invite you to definitely, take care of yourself. Like that's how you sustain yourself in the long run on the dating journey. Take care of yourself, be in your pajamas, have many nights at home where you're reading, where you're journaling, where you're watching your favorite movie. And then I would also invite you to maybe even go to a social event at least a month and do the thing that you actually love doing. So if you're into climbing or you're into emotion, so maybe there's like different like storytelling meetups or storytelling events that you're attending the event and people are like pouring their heart and soul into it, and then you're also surrounded by an audience of people that really resonate with that type of vibe. So there's like the Moth Radio, and I'm sure that there's also, depending on your city, like local storytelling events. So like do the thing that you actually want to do. You don't have to go to like these like soul crushing speed dating events or something that just completely disinterests you. So like do the thing that you really want to do, also with the expectation that like this is for you, and if you happen to meet somebody, then that is just the cherry on top. So I know that, you are such a passionate person and you just like want to go to the event and find somebody. I just want to like manage those expectations and make it more realistic, as well as make it more fun. So even if you just smile at another person, or you're really curious about someone, you walk up to them and just want to get to know them as a human being, and that is a win. So those are the tips and tricks that I have around that. I just want to like honor what it's like to be an introvert too. Like as an ENFP, I'm an ambivert. So I lean more on like the extroverted side, but I definitely need my introverted side. So I know what it's like to just like want to be at home. So I get it.
Yes, for sure. Gabby, you have such amazing advice, and I so much appreciate you being on the show. Tell us where we can find you, your website and your social media.
Yeah, so I hang out a lot on Instagram. I share a lot of free resources and tips, and my handle is Gabrielle Valdes with an S. And then my website is the same, so GabrielleValdes.com.
Okay, here's some takeaways. Number 1, you can use the Myers-Briggs personality test as a tool to understand yourself and remove the shame that you feel about yourself. Number 2, being different doesn't mean you're broken. Number 3, we don't always get things right the first time, especially in our career, but everything we do leads us to what we're meant to do. Number 4, a lot of INFJs deal with perfectionism, but it's not always a bad thing. Number 5, the behavior change cycle is really helpful for INFJs to consider. There are 4 phases: pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, maintenance, and relapse or making mistakes. Number 6, matching up real life with expectations is a difficult challenge. Number 7, there are 2 kinds of romantics: hopeful and hopeless. Hopeless is basing your long-term decisions on a feeling or the honeymoon phase. We end up putting too much pressure on our partner or potential partner. Being hopeful is being realistic and loving yourself first. Number 8, INFJs are very open to giving, but we have to balance it with taking care of ourselves too. Number 9, INFJs are prone to taking things to the extreme in order to please someone else. And number 10, just because it hasn't worked doesn't mean it won't. It just hasn't worked yet. Remember, you can find all the links for the show notes on my website, which is thequietonespodcast.com. That's all that we have for today. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate your support. Please make sure that you subscribe so that you don't miss an episode. And just a reminder, one more time, you can watch all of the video interviews at youtube.com/thequietonespodcast. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you again next week.